Hi everybody, thank you for joining us. Today brings you a surprising twist. Ex-husband appears to support James and Tu Diep. What is his true motive? James arrived at the cafe just as sunlight spilled through the tall windows, casting long golden beams across the polished wooden floor. He paused at the threshold, smoothing the lapel of his jacket and taking a measured breath. The faint scent of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the soft hum of conversation and the distant clink of spoons against porcelain. An ordinary morning scene, except for the tension knotting his stomach. He had asked Tu Diep to meet him here under the pretense of discussing their weekend plans, but the real reason lay deeper. The unexpected return of the man she once called husband. Across the room, Tu Diep sat at their usual corner table, entwined in a swirl of mixed emotions. Her latte sat untouched before her, steam rising in lazy spirals as she replayed the message on her phone one last time. He was coming not just to see her, but, astonishingly, to offer his blessing for her happiness with James. She pressed her fingertips to her temples, willing calm into her racing heart. The memory of his cold accusations that she was the reason for their childlessness weighed heavily on her. And yet today, he claimed to come bearing support, not scorn. As she looked up, her breath caught at the sight of him stepping through the door. He moved with deliberate restraint, scanning the room until his eyes settled on Diep and James. There was something in his posture, an almost apologetic slump to his shoulders, a hesitation in his gait that spoke of remorse rather than triumph. Yet the unexpected nature of his arrival sent a tremor of doubt through her. Could forgiveness really be possible after all the hurt? James rose from his seat as the ex-husband approached, exchanging a brief, guarded greeting. Diep watched them with trembling curiosity, her mind racing through every memory of that past life, the cold silences, the harsh words spoken in anger, the nights she lay awake, blaming herself. Now the same man stood before her, hands unclenched and voice unthreatening, promising nothing but honesty. In that charged moment, the cafe's ambient warmth and soft music faded into a backdrop for a more intimate drama. The real question hung between them like a taut thread. Was this gesture born of genuine regret and desire to set things right? Or was it a carefully veiled scheme to unsettle their bond? Diep and James shared a glance that spoke volumes, trust mingled with suspicion, as they prepared to discover the ex-husband's true motive. The ex-husband paused at the threshold of the cafe, as though measuring the weight of each step before committing to the path ahead. Steam rose from the espresso machine in lazy curls, and the chatter of other patrons seemed to hush as he advanced toward James and Tu Diep's table. He wore a simple coat, hands tucked into the pockets, shoulders drawn inward in an almost apologetic slump. In that instant, his presence felt less like a challenge and more like a confession waiting to be voiced. James remained standing, one hand resting lightly on the back of his chair, eyes narrowing slightly as he appraised the situation. His usual confidence flickered, a sign that he, too, was off balance. Yet he maintained a controlled calm, offering the ex-husband a seat with a steady nod. "Please sit," James said, voice even but firm. "We're listening." Tu Diep's breath caught as the man she had once loved slid into the seat opposite her. His familiar profile was shifted now by lines of regret etched around his eyes and mouth. She watched him through a veil of unresolved emotion, anxiety at his return, curiosity about his purpose, and a cautious hope that perhaps this meeting would finally bring closure. She folded her hands in her lap, fingers twisting the edge of her scarf as she summoned the courage to face him. He cleared his throat, and the faint rasp of uncertainty trembled through his words. "Thank you," he began, voice low. "I know this is unexpected. I came because I owe you both an explanation." His gaze swept between Tu Diep and James, lingering on her with an intensity that made her pulse flutter. She searched his eyes for sincerity, unsure whether to trust the apology she sensed beneath the surface. James leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, gaze hard but open. "Explain what?" he asked, tone polite but probing. "Your reasons for showing up here today?" The ex-husband swallowed and lifted his chin. "I've lived with regret for years," he admitted, voice cracking slightly. "I blame Tu Diep for our inability to start a family, but I was wrong. I should have supported her, instead of turning my anger into cruelty." He glanced at Tu Diep, seeing the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I couldn't keep pretending I was blameless." Tu Diep felt a jolt of shock ripple through her. Memories of harsh words and cold silences rose unbidden. She had believed herself defective, haunted by the whispered judgments of a man she once trusted. Now he sat before her, own confession trembling on his lips, offering an apology she never expected. Silence enveloped the trio as the ex-husband drew a deep breath. Around them, the cafe's ambiance resumed, cups clinking, baristas calling out orders, yet within their circle, time seemed suspended. James studied the man with measured caution. Tu Diep braced for impact, and the ex-husband gathered his resolve to reveal the truth that would change everything. James folded his arms, leaning back as he studied the ex-husband's face. His jaw was set, eyes narrowed with cautious curiosity. "You say you were wrong," James said quietly. "But why come now? Why support us after all this time?" The ex-husband's gaze flicked to Tu Diep, lingering on the tremor in her hand as she gripped her scarf. He swallowed, voice thick with emotion. "Because I can no longer bear the weight of my lies," he admitted. "Every day I watched you both from afar, saw the kindness James showed you. It reminded me what I never gave you. Respect, partnership, compassion." Diep's heart pounded. Memories crashed in, his cold departures, the accusatory glances he cast when she dared to hope, the stifling silence of a home-turned prison. And now he spoke of compassion as if it were a foreign concept he had only just discovered. She pressed her lips together, uncertainty twisting in her chest like a thorn. James's expression hardened. "Compassion," he repeated. "You blamed her for our childlessness. You accused her of failing you." The ex-husband closed his eyes, shaking his head. "I blamed her to cover my own shame. I thought if I convinced her I was perfect, no one would suspect me." His voice cracked. "But I was wrong. You both deserve the truth." A charged silence fell. The cafe's light chatter felt distant as Diep's mind raced. Could he mean it? Could the man who had wounded her so deeply truly repent? Doubt tangled with a cautious hope. She wanted to trust him, to believe this moment could undo years of pain. James inhaled slowly, then leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then tell us everything," he said, tone clipped. "No more half-truths." The ex-husband nodded, straightening in his chair. He glanced at Diep, offering a faint, apologetic smile. "After our divorce, I sought answers. I underwent every test the doctors recommended. I discovered that the issue was mine, genetic, irreversible, but I was too proud to admit it." Diep's breath caught in her throat. The knowledge he had kept from her, knowledge that could have freed her from decades of self-blame, felt like a betrayal too deep to fathom. Her chest felt tight, as though memories of every tear she'd shed were pressing against her ribs. James held her gaze, silent encouragement twinkling in his dark eyes. Diep knew she had his unwavering support, but could she face this revelation without fracturing the fragile peace they had built? The ex-husband leaned in, voice dropping to a hushed urgency. "I didn't come here just to apologize. I came to right the record, to give you both the chance at a future unburdened by lies." Diep's hand trembled as she reached for her latte, the cup rattling against the saucer. The moment stretched taut between accusation and forgiveness, between past wounds and the possibility of healing. The truth hovered on the brink of revelation, poised to shatter everything or set them free. A hush settled over the table as he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a slim envelope. His hands trembled ever so slightly as he laid it before James. "These are the medical reports," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I hid them all these years." James picked up the envelope, eyes widening as he opened it and thumbed through the neatly organized pages. Lab results, doctor's notes, genetic analyses. Each sheet bore the unmistakable conclusion: the fertility issue lay with him, not with Tu Diep. Tu Diep's world seemed to pivot on its axis. She stared at the documents, disbelief warring with relief. Memories of lonely nights spent questioning her worth flooded back. But the clarity of these reports dissolved years of self-blame in an instant. "He lied to me," she whispered, voice trembling. "All that time." He bowed his head, shame etched into every feature. "I was terrified," he admitted. "Terrified of being seen as weak, of admitting my own failure. So I blamed you, shifting my guilt onto you." James placed a steady hand on Diep's wrist. "You kept this from her?" he asked quietly. Gaze locked on the X's. The man nodded, shoulders heavy with remorse. "I thought I was protecting her from more pain," he explained. "But in truth, I stole her chance at peace." Diep's throat tightened as she processed his words. The weight she'd carried, the accusations, the whispers, the endless self-doubt came crashing down. She closed her eyes, letting the truth wash over her like a cleansing rain. When she opened them again, something in her softened. "Why bring this now?" she asked, voice steady despite her racing heart. He met her gaze with raw honesty. "Because you deserve the truth. You deserve to live unburdened." James folded the reports and slid them back into the envelope. "Thank you for finally telling us," he said. His tone was calm, but an undercurrent of resolve ran through his words. Diep inhaled, feeling a fragile hope bloom in her chest. The betrayal of the past remained, but so did the possibility of healing. In that moment, the truth stood between them, shattering old wounds, yet offering the promise of a future built on honesty and compassion. Diep rose from her chair with a steadying breath, her gaze lingering on the envelope that held the truth of her past. James stood beside her, hand outstretched in quiet solidarity. For a moment, the three of them shared a charged silence. Years of misunderstanding distilled into a single, unspoken decision. Diep's fingertips brushed James's palm as she accepted his unwavering support. The warmth of his touch grounded her, reminding her that she was no longer alone in her journey. She turned back to face her ex-husband, meeting his eyes with a mixture of compassion and resolve. "I forgive you," she said softly. "Not because it erases the hurt, but because I choose to free myself from it." He bowed his head, relief and remorse flickering across his features. Diep gave him a gentle nod, signaling both closure and gratitude for his honesty. Then, with a lightness she hadn't felt in years, she pivoted back to James. Together, they stepped outside into the afternoon sun. The city's rhythms resumed around them. Distant traffic, the call of street vendors. But inside Diep's heart, a new calm prevailed. She drew in a deep breath, filling her lungs with possibility. "Thank you," she whispered to James, her voice bright with hope. He slipped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "You never deserved that pain," he said. "From now on, we write our own story." His words settled in her chest like a promise. They walked side by side down the sidewalk, the envelope safely tucked away. No longer a weight, but a symbol of liberated truth with each step. Diep felt her confidence bloom, her past no longer a chain but a foundation upon which she and James could build. As they paused at a street corner, James looked at her with a gentle smile. Shall we celebrate? He asked. Diep laughed, a clear, joyous sound that carried all the lightness of her newfound freedom. Together, they turned toward the cafe where their journey had begun, hand in hand, ready to embrace whatever came next. Do you believe they can fully heal the past and move forward together? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Thank you for watching.
Xin chào quý thính giả đã kênh Ly Tu Diep ST. Chúng tôi đang sử dụng câu chuyện xoay quanh của Diệp và James, hai người có một mối tình gọi là không phân biệt giai cấp và giàu nghèo. Họ đã cùng nhau vượt qua những trở ngại trong cuộc sống để đến với một tình yêu hay. Mọi người xem